Scene one, Apple, take one.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Film Notes, the show where I talk to people in the industry about the industry. My name is Shane Borza. I'm an award-winning filmmaker, and I'm here to start the fourth season of the show. So if you weren't aware, please go back and watch some of the previous seasons because we've spoken to a lot of great people, including my new filmmaker friend, Christopher Wells, who is from Brooklyn, New York, and he has his own company. He's got his own award-winning feature. So we're going to be talking a lot about different things that he does. But first, I just want to say thank you for being here and welcome to the show.
Yeah, this is exciting. I'm happy to be here.
We got connected because we both have some films out through Indie Rights, which is a distribution company. And actually, I was just mentioning to you that I had gone to AFM. I live in Las Vegas, and it was in Las Vegas this year. So I was able to actually meet the ladies from the Indie Rights distribution company, which I hadn't done before. We'd only ever talked on email. And one of the things that they had mentioned is like, you got to be active in the Facebook group so you can meet some of the other filmmakers.
Yeah.
And I told them about, well, I have this podcast. And they're like, well, you should interview people to get to meet them and get to know like how they got their films. And so you're the first of the couple of people that I've connected with. So I'm really excited to hear not only your version of filmmaking, especially since you're on the kind of opposite coast of me, but as we all know, if you talk to 100 people in the industry about how they got in, you're going to get 100 different answers. So I wanted to just start with, how did you get into filmmaking? And was that something that like you grew up with? Like you always loved movies? Did you stumble into it? So, how did you get to be the filmmaker that you are now?
Well, it actually started when I got kicked out of Spanish class in high school because I was making the class laugh, including the teacher. So she said, look, I'll give you a passing grade of 65, just roam the halls. So I did that for a couple of weeks. And then Mr. Ruckard, who was the TV production instructor for a senior class, I was a sophomore at the time. So this wasn't I wasn't allowed to take this class, but he asked me what I was doing. And I told him. He thought it was funny. He goes, well, why don't you sit in on this class? And so he always seemed like a really cool guy. And I sat in for 2 years on the senior TV production class. They had, some millionaire died and gave all their money to this TV production arm of this high school in Glen Cove, Long Island. So they had the best equipment, green screen, a full studio. We were learning filmmaking, but just doing video. And that was the first time that I ever felt smart, because I'm dyslexic and a lot of artists, we have learning disabilities, and I learn more by, getting my hands dirty and creating something and seeing an end result and seeing a story develop, from script to screen is something that was very satisfying for me. And by getting those 2 extra years, just by sitting there, just observing, I never missed a class. And that was the start of not only my passion for film, but my understanding on how to make a story work. And I'm still so grateful for that experience. Unfortunately, Mr. Ruckard passed away years ago, but that was like the best experience for me, because honestly, like I never felt smart before that. And my SATs were horrible, and math was just like, it didn't make any sense to me, because like it doesn't mean anything to me. But film did, because if you don't have enough shots, what are you going to cut to? If you don't have this, if this isn't on the script, and there's so many things that as a kid, it really made sense to me. And that's, I thought, a really great way to learn.
And it just goes to show that it's not that people can't learn. It's just that sometimes they don't learn in a certain way.
Yeah.
Or like you said, it doesn't apply or it doesn't land. And so I'm so glad that landed for you. And I think we all, if we continue to look, we'll eventually find our thing or our tribe or whatever. I think, unfortunately, some people, they don't have that for so long that they kind of stop looking. So I love when people get that spark or that inspiration. How did that transpire to working in the industry, like, did you go to film school, or what was the next step like after, because that was like high school, did you say?
Yeah, yeah, that was in high school. So then what happened was is that my guidance counselor didn't really understand what I needed. So she said, you could go into mass communications. And I was like, all right, I guess so. So I went to Towson State University, and there I met a filmmaker teacher, instructor, and I was making films in his class, but I was doing more than what the other students were doing. And he pulled me aside and he said, um, where are you from? You know, you don't talk like you're from Maryland. Like, where are you from? I said, I'm from New York City. He goes, well, what do you want to do? I was like, well, I guess I want to do something in film. Like at that time, I didn't really understand. He goes, why are you here? This is not a film school. You should go to, you know, somewhere in New York City. And so I thought about it and I wasn't sure. And he said, look, I'll make it easier for you. If you don't leave, I'm going to give you an F. And I was like, holy, you know, again, another teacher believed in me and gave me that spark and was like, look, you got to get out of here because this is not a place for you. Whatever he saw in me, whatever, I'm not saying like I'm like super talented or anything like that, but the fact that a teacher believed in me and told me, hey, if you don't leave, I'm not going to let you pass this class. So I left. I went to School of Visual Arts in Manhattan, SVA. My grades were not so great, so they wouldn't let me in. And so, but they had a thing called continuing ed. So I took a editing class with this teacher, a Vietnam vet named Lynn Vance, and he was amazing. And so I was learning. It was an editing class, so I was learning how to edit. And I asked him. I said, you know, we were learning how to edit Bonanza, like a Bonanza episode. And so I did that. And I said, you know, would you mind if I shot something and I edited it in class? He was like, yeah, go for it. So I did, and he really liked it. And, or at least he liked my enthusiasm and the fact that I was really into this. And so he said, are you a student here? And I said, well, I'm trying to be, but they wouldn't let me in because my grades aren't so great, aren't so great. He goes, well, that's every artist. And so he went to the board and he goes, if you don't let this student in, I'm going to quit. And it was because he believed that artists cannot be, our grades may not be that great. And, but the way that we express ourselves, the way that we write, the way that we can, you know, form a story and tell it or show it, that's where the SATs can't gauge, you know. And so he really fought for me. And so I went to SVA for a few years, and I had a teacher named Ralph Topperoff who told the class, he goes, look, he goes, I don't care about what grade you're going to get because it's not going to help you in the film industry. He goes, but I'll give you one word of advice. This is to the whole class, not just to me. He says, do not become a film student, become a filmmaker. And what he meant by that, he goes, if you take 4 years of college, you kind of, you're not, you need to go out there and work and get on sets and don't be a film student where like, okay, you got to take your 4 years, always be a film student, obviously. But he's saying, you know, you should go out and try to get work. Within 2 years, you should probably start thinking about leaving here. So he said, you know, because when you graduate film school, that doesn't, no one cares. Like when you're hiring people, no one gives a shit if you graduated films. Like that doesn't matter. They care about your credits, what you've done, your IMDb and all that kind of stuff. So that was interesting. And so then I started working, you know, for scraps and you know, left SVA, but I kept networking because that's also important. And then I started my company in 2003, maybe, I don't even know. And just doing everything from marketing videos to short films to now a feature film, or well, 2 feature documentaries plus a narrative, and you know, just trying to get work like every other artist and collaborating with other people and being grateful for any opportunity that I have and being a team player, trying not to step on toes because there's sometimes you deal with egos and you got to make sure that, you know, their fragile egos are cool and, you know, you're helping uplift their vision or whatever that might be. You're, you know, as a producer, you're dealing with a lot of different, you know, personalities. And so you have to be very diplomatic and being from New York, that's something that I think gives me a little bit of an advantage because there is you do deal with a lot of different people in a big city like this, so kind of gives me another you know, thing that I can kind of fall back on, I guess.
it sounds like you had a kind of series of really great teachers that you stumbled into. And
Yeah.
I think that regardless of whether it's a parent or, a mentor, most of the artists that I know, or regardless of how, quote, successful they are, and that was something I felt really lucky. I went to an international school because I was in film school in Australia, and
Oh.
the the head of school said, most people, when they think of wanting to be, well, first of all, they think of like when you want to be, you go to film school, what do they want to do? They want to be a director, and one of the things they learn is like, oh, there's a whole swath of different roles that you can do, like editing, for instance. So that kind of opens people up. They go in different directions. But the other thing he said is, he's like, being a known name, it's very rare. And he goes, imagine if you were just like a regular person with a regular job, only instead of a regular job, it was a film job. He's like, could that not be success of like, oh, I get to go to set every day, or I get to go to the studio every day, or, instead of just I'm sitting in the office every day. And that was the first time that, because a lot of us talked about that, we're like, oh, yeah, most people, quote, in the industry are just working. And it's just a parallel version of like having a normal job, but it's not a normal job, And it was those types of people that kind of plant these seeds, and you go, oh. So for instance, I went back to LA and worked in post-production at Deluxe for 10 years. It was never on my radar. Like, I knew the name Deluxe, or like By Deluxe, Prince by Deluxe, and you see that on the end of the movies and stuff. So I kind of knew that company, but it was never a thought to, oh, go work for a company and like have a job, like a regular job. It just happened to be in post-production in the film industry instead of like working on set. But it opened up this whole new career path for me. And it was all because like I felt like I could trace it directly back to that one teacher that one time saying that one thing. And you go, wow. So it's amazing for me when I hear people talk about these threads that enable them to go from like, and sometimes this is just being older and looking back or what have you, but to have that, like, well, I had this one teacher in high school that led to this one teacher here that led to this one teacher here. Like, I'm so glad to have heard that all that happened. Now, one of the things you mentioned passing there, and I think it says the early 2000s, was you opened your company. I think it's called A Pictures. And talk to me a little bit about what you've been able to do with that, both either for your own projects or maybe other people that are like hiring you to do things.
Early 2000, I was a personal trainer, and then I was freelancing with Cablevision, and I was a writer, producer, director for these very local commercials. And what happened was that one of the producers left, so there was an opening, and they asked me if I wanted to work there. And I didn't know how corporate it was because I was coming in as a freelancer, so I wasn't used to sitting behind a desk or having an office. And so I did that, and one of my clients asked me, hey, this is like 2002, and they said, hey, I'm thinking about posting some of my commercials online. Do you recommend that, and would you be able to do that? And I saw it as a really great opportunity, so I went to my director, my boss, and I said, hey, I think that this is going to catch on. I think people are going to want to do this and not just put their commercials on Cablevision, because Cablevision, when any commercial, people could turn it off, but on the internet you could reach a more of a target audience. And even back then I think it was more tailor made for small businesses. And she said, no, we're not going to do that. And I thought, well, this is money, why not make it? Why not, and she didn't want to do that. So, and then they outsourced the bigger commercials to outside production companies. They never used us, and our boss never fought for us. So I didn't really have a lot of respect for her, because I thought, why wouldn't she try to advance our careers? Like, if Cablevision is a multi-million-dollar company, and why are they outsourcing their commercials when they have a commercial arm of Cablevision, which is, let's say 8 different producers? And that didn't make sense to me. And I thought, you know what, why don't I just shoot these commercials and, for these clients and fulfill their needs? And so the ball kind of started rolling, and I couldn't do both. So I took the leap and I said, all right, I'm going to just do this now full time and, just get work that way. So I was getting work doing mostly marketing stuff for, local businesses and, putting it on their website and whatever, doing everything from photography to commercials to interviews to, whatever the client needed. And then that would help me fund personal projects that I want to do, short films. And I tend to do more weird kind of films, like things that are a little bit kind of out there that aren't on the, on the whatever the beaten path, whatever you want to call it. And so when you're doing marketing, you have to do something that's really tailor-made for the client, that's going to help the client. Well, when you do a short film for yourself, you can kind of break those rules and do whatever you want. And so it was a nice way for me to kind of like let loose and kind of, do things that I like to watch. And so, one hand, helps the other. And but every day is a struggle as a freelancer in New York City. Everyone's a filmmaker, everyone's a freelancer. So you just have to just try to get the work that you can get, do the best job that you can, make connections, uplift your team, and don't be afraid to give compliments, because nothing is worse when someone comes up with an idea and then someone else takes credit for it. Like you want it's a team effort. And but it's fun, but it's challenging to own your own business and to try to make way with, when everyone, especially now, everyone wants to be a content creator, and it's just you're dealing with, you're competing with people that you cannot believe that you have to compete against these people, because they're not crafting a story, they're just taking their clothes off to their underwear in front of a Instagram filter. It's just like, Jesus Christ, like you got to try to navigate that and say, okay, well, I want to do content that is thoughtful. And when I say thoughtful, I mean that took thought to create it. And, whether it be comedy, horror, whatever it might be. But it is challenging. I mean, it's not, it's also because a lot of these platforms aren't paying what they really should. You can have 1 million views and make practically nothing on YouTube. And it's like, how does an artist get 1 million views, like a recording artist, when they make an album? How can they get so many views and make so little money? And it's like, these platforms are making millions and giving us little crumbs. And so like you have to keep making films or doing whatever just to be relevant and to have those hits and views and comments and whatever. And so it's like you have to really understand like the whole scope of things. And sometimes being the owner of a production company, you have to think of all that stuff, where when you're freelancing as a director or whatever, you don't have to worry about, let's say, the marketing or all those other things that a lot of people don't even realize that goes on. And so I know I'm rambling a little bit, but there's a lot a lot there. I'll shut up.
Well, no, I'm glad that you did that, because as you were talking, I was like, oh, there's like 10 things here I want to go deeper into.
Yeah.
And well, the first thing that came to mind is, like you mentioned, it's such a change to go from, which we all start off with, is just getting whatever work you could possibly get on, like getting on whatever set you possibly get on, copy, credit, and meals, or, whatever, you're not even getting paid, or you're getting like $50 a day, or, whatever.
Yeah.
And you don't think or worry about any of that stuff. And you don't even necessarily know to think or worry about that stuff. You're just worrying about, can I meet enough people that eventually I don't need the 3 side jobs? I could just do this, And then a couple years later, hey, now I'm working full time. And then you start thinking about, I want to make something. And that's usually where we get stuck in short film hell. You're just like, oh, I made 10 short films, or a commercial or 2, and 10 music videos, or whatever. You're doing photo shoots, you're doing all this stuff. You're starting to learn how to make things, but again, you're just kind of like director for hire, filmmaker for hire. You're doing 8 different hats, and that starts you on that journey of like, oh, like I'm producing, like I have to figure out parking, like I have to figure out emergency, like where's the nearest hospital, like I have to figure out like what happens if the location falls through at the last time, like I have to figure out, like nobody else is bringing food, I have to worry about bringing food. And that's I think the beginning of people learning how to produce. And that's when I think that first evolution happens. But then it's a whole nother thing if you open your own studio or your own company or your own whatever, because then, like you mentioned, oh, all this other stuff that was there peripherally, but I was the sound guy. I didn't have to worry about that. Like, well, now you have to worry about the marketing and the making the money and how do you pay the bills and all those things. So I think that's a kind of a scary, but also common evolution for most people. And that is something I wanted to bring back to your story, which is because I saw a bunch of your short films. So thanks for sharing those. And they're all, I believe, on your YouTube channel. And you have like a width of different styles, but they all have a similar theme. Like you mentioned, they're kind of like this quirky like view of things, which is great because that's very similar to like what I like. A couple of them are, you have like a satirical short film about whatever, and I was like, oh, you had me a satire.
Yeah.
You know? But how did you go from that to, you mentioned 2 feature documentaries, and now you have the narrative feature. So what did it look like for you to go from I'm working at this company to starting my own company? I'm doing all the work. I'm making short films. I'm kind of like using the income from the day job, even though it's your own company, and making your own stuff, to then saying, well, now I have 3 features out, 2 documentaries and 1 narrative. How did that evolution happen for you?
Well, the first feature documentary that I did was on my dad, like a few years before he passed away. He was an artist living in Vermont, a painter. And so I wanted to do a documentary to help him sell his work. He was selling work, but I just thought this would be a really great way to kind of showcase his work, maybe to a broader audience and whatever. And he was, great speaker. So I shot that on my Nikon, and I had a Tascam mixer and Sennheiser, lav mics, and didn't know what the hell I was doing technically. But somehow I was able to do it. And so seeing that piece all the way through, like I think it's like maybe 60 minutes, whatever, is a little different than doing, like, let's say, the short interviews that I've done. I've done interviews for, various, companies or not for profits or whatever, but it's a different mindset when you're doing a feature. And so I've always loved interview-based documentaries. I just really like interviews. And then when my stepfather passed away, not my dad, but my stepfather passed away before my dad did, my mother and my stepfather were really good friends with my dad. Everyone got along, even though my mom and my dad were divorced. Everyone was very cool. Like, I grew up in a household where my parents got divorced, let's say, when I was like 4, but they remained really good friends. So I learned how to be diplomatic. In any event, when my stepfather passed away, they had a house near my dad's house in Vermont, but my mom could no longer afford to keep this little summer house. So she called me up. She goes, "Hey, I'm going to sell the house." I said, well, maybe I can shoot a film there, thinking I'll shoot a short film there. Now, this is after when I did the documentary. So I said, "Can you just give me a month?" And I'm thinking, I got to write a script. I got to, do all this stuff. And I'm thinking a short film. And it kind of snowballed into a bigger project. And it turned out where I asked her, I said, "Hey, can you tell the buyers," because the buyers actually bought the house, but they were going to do a walkthrough. I said, just have them do the final walkthrough like sometime in May. I think it was like May 15th or something like that. So I had 4 months to raise money, write a script, hire everybody, like do everything. And my only 2 people that were really helping me, one was a lawyer who doesn't really know much about film, but he's very enthusiastic about film, which is great. And then the other person was she worked at a dentist's office, but I didn't have anyone like experienced that like kind of knew what they were doing, that could kind of finish my sentences. And this was like my first narrative feature where I was going to try to get a distribution deal. And I kind of knew that was going to be the path. The documentary, I was kind of using more like locally and doing screenings in Vermont and just kind of uplifting my father. And that was a great experience, but this was going to be at a whole other level. I'm dealing with actors, makeup, catering, and like all this other stuff. And so, I was able to make that film, and obviously that was a very interesting experience. And then I was hired to do another documentary about the Holocaust. And that was a whole different, experience, but it's kind of interesting because when we were at a festival for the Holocaust film, and one of the Q&A, one of the people said, "Oh, you're kind of known as a horror director." And I thought, yeah, well, that's kind of cool because I love horror, but I do a lot of documentaries also. Like I love documentaries. So, but like I'll take it. I'll wear that hat if that's what you guys want to, whatever, even though like what I'm promoting is a documentary. But I think it's important, and I think it makes it life more interesting when you can kind of do different projects. And I don't want to just do one thing, I want to do different things. But I do tend to lean towards the weird or the horror or dark comedy. But, I have 3 projects right now that I'm going to be in post next week. And one is a documentary and 2 are horror films, shorts. These are shorts, but, I like mixing it up. I don't know if I answered your question.
You
I tend
did.
to,
And,
go off.
well, and I wasn't sure too what the history was of like the order the films were done or whatever. So it's interesting for me, actually. You went from like documentary to narrative back to documentary. And I just learned this the other day, Parkinson's law, which states that the allotted work will fill the allotted time. And my favorite story about this was when Death Proof came out, the Tarantino double feature with the Robert Rodriguez movie, and they did Grindhouse, but there were 2 separate movies, and they wanted to premiere it at Cannes, and so they told him, "You only have 4 weeks to edit the film." And he always uses Sally Menke, or used before she passed away, as her editor, and they always took 8 weeks. And he said, "Well, I can't do it because it takes 8 weeks to edit a feature." And they're like, "No, it doesn't. And you have 4 weeks, so like get it done because we really want to take this film to Cannes." And he learned, oh, it takes 8 weeks because that's what I expected to take. But it doesn't have to take that long. Oh, I never knew that. And because he was given a limitation, he learned this whole new thing. And he said, every film before that was 8 weeks, 8 weeks, 8 weeks, 8 weeks. He goes, and I have never done a film after that took 8 weeks. Some are shorter, some are longer. They all take as much time as they take, but it takes 8 weeks because that's how long it takes. And I think a lot of us fall into, well, this is how it works because this is how I know how to do it. And so I love that you were like, okay, I only have 4 months, so I got to figure this out. I mean, as you know, some people, it takes, we were taught like it takes 3 years to make a movie. It's a year to write the script, a year to raise the money, and a year to make it. And you definitely can make a movie in 4 months because you have a deadline and you're super motivated. And that's, I mentioned Robert Rodriguez in passing, and that's one of his things from his, I forget what it's called, but he has his like outlaw film school or whatever it's called. And that's one of the things he says. It's like, use what you have. And so I think that's a great lesson there of like, ooh, we have this house. Before we lose it, let's use it and make a movie. But also it becomes like a time capsule. You're like, oh, for the rest of my life, I'll be able to see this movie from the house that is no longer in the family, but used to be. So I love hearing that on a couple things. You mentioned that you're switching back to doing some short films. You obviously have been switching back and forth from like documentary and narrative. You are known as kind of the horror guy in certain things. So what would you say, through all of this, that might be some notes that stand out for you, whether it's for people who are making short films or features, or whether it's documentary or narrative? What might be the lessons learned when you look back at the various things that you've done that stand out to you that either you want to really impart to other people, or they might be like, oh, I wish, I knew this when I was younger, when I was getting started?
That's such a good question. I mean, there's so many things. I was talking to another filmmaker about this, where I have a friend who's an actress, and she hasn't seen my film, which is kind of strange because you'd think, your friends would want to go see your film. But that's the reality. Is just because you're a filmmaker does not mean that your acquaintances and friends are all going to run and go see it. And so it could be heartbreaking. But but she was one day talking to me saying like how she's taking these acting classes and that, it's so hard being an actress. I'm thinking, she never once even acted like she wanted to act with me, or even asked me a question as a director or a producer or anything. And sometimes I feel like a lot of younger people have this disconnect that they don't understand that if you have friends that are producers and directors, you should go watch their stuff. comment on their YouTube channel, be a little proactive. You don't have to kiss their ass or be like a total, like, whatever to them, but show some effort. When I was going to college, if anyone was, a filmmaker or whatever, like, you try to, like, at least compliment them, or be part of, like, their world, and try to network with them. But I see that there's a lack of that now, and I think it's because of social media. There's such a instant gratification of, if I put something up, if I'm halfway decent, like, looking, I'm going to get all these accolades. So why even, really try to do these other things that someone at my age, like, we had to kind of do. And so I think one thing for actors is that you should watch stuff that your filmmaker friends are making and try to talk to them about it, like, because film is a really interesting thing to talk about. When you talk to other filmmakers, it's kind of interesting to see, like, how they made that. Oh, you made that in 2 days? Wow, that looks like a really big production. I can't believe you made that short film in just 2 days, and learn. You can also learn. And then by doing that, the filmmaker might be thinking, what, I might want to hire this person for my next role. If they're, obviously they got to be dependable and show up on time and all that kind of stuff. Because for someone like me who shoots quite often, I try to hire my friends. I did a short film called Don't Litter in Prospect Park. All of them, except for one person, I knew personally. Actually, no, sorry. There was two people that I hired that I didn't know. One was a comedian that played the killer, and the other one, the lead actress, I went through Actors Access and I hired her through that way. But everyone else, they were, friends of mine.
Sorry to stop the show, but we've got some bills to pay around here, and to do that, I wanted to point out a couple things I've got on offer at shaneborza.com. As both a master level mental health coach and an award-winning filmmaker, I have the experience and expertise to help you go further faster, regardless of whether that is in your production or life. I am psyched to announce all my courses and books have been updated and expanded and are available on both Apple Books and at my shop. Especially wanted to point out my Film Notes book and workbook, where you can learn everything you need to make your film and get it out to the world. If you need help with either your life or film, please reach out. And now, back to the show.
And I tried to do that with another short film that I was trying to shoot. And I kept getting flaky people. I kept reaching out to people, like, on Instagram, saying, hey, I'm shooting this film. Here's my IMDb, so don't think like I'm like some, whatever. And most people didn't get back to me. I had people that, like, flaked out on me, and I'm like, oh my God. So I went through Actors Access eventually, but I just was like, I used to be able to network and be able to go to people, say, hey, do you want to bean something? Yeah, sure. And then, like, you just create art. Nowadays, it's a little different. People have way too many options, at least what they think are options. And, they're making money off their Instagram. Why do they need to do your stupid little film? I mean, that's what they're thinking. And so I think people need to kind of get a little bit of a reality check, because I think social media, the content is going to change. I think when you have content that is actually written and well produced, I think that's going to rise to the top. I think all this other kind of stuff is sort of, I don't think that's going to stay forever. I think people are going to get a little old, watching all that kind of shit. And I just think networking is an art, and it's not what can you do for me? It's what can I do for you? How can I help you? That's how you network. You don't try to take something, you try to give something, you try to uplift some other person. And I think people just don't know how to network anymore. And I think that's something that they should do. And it doesn't take much effort. Going on someone's YouTube channel and commenting is a really great start. If it's just it's common sense, but common sense ain't so common. And so I kind of feel like, and I also think that there's not a lot, but there's some people that have an ego where they think that their film is the greatest thing in the world, and maybe it is, but they have to have a little bit of a reality check of what type of level of participation your friends and viewers have. Like, I know someone who made a film, and I went to go see it at a festival, supported him, but now he wants me to watch his film again at another festival. I'm like, look, No. As great as I think your film is, I'll watch it once it's on a platform, but I'm not going to go to every festival that you're at. Like I saw your film, supported you. Like I have my own life. And I think sometimes people kind of lose sight of that, and they want too much, but they're not willing to give it. Because, look, if you want me to do all this stuff for you, like I also have things that I need. How can you, like, it's got to be, what can I do for you? Not, oh, just watch my stuff and do all the stuff for me. And then, you don't get anything out of it. You're like, well, that's not fair, and then you don't want to be made to feel like a jerk for saying something because, you just want equal rights, like an equal relationship. And so I think there's, a learning curve. I think a reality that I don't think people are kind of really thinking about. And I think so my last thing that I would say is I think also people need to learn how to do sound and shoot video. Don't just try to be a writer director, because everyone wants to be the director. Like everyone wants to be, but not everyone could be an editor. Not everyone could be a sound person. Not everyone could be the person actually shooting. So I think it's important to learn how to do that and create content where you're doing it. So if you make a mistake, it's not the end of the world because it's your own film, but you have to learn how to do all those technical things because it makes you a better director and producer. When you know that your DP needs to talk to your DIT to talk to your editor, and you know that, what they need to give to each other, you can orchestrate that as a producer way better than if you've never done sound before and you don't know what a Kodak is. Like you don't have to be a genius with all the technical stuff, but you kind of need to know at least something. And I think that's something that I didn't do enough when I was in college. And that if I could go back, I would do, let's say, sound, because I didn't do sound then. Now I'm doing more sound, obviously. But I think, being a one-man band is not a bad thing, because you are learning all these little things like editing, sound, lighting, all that kind of stuff. And I think that allows you to bring the budget smaller because what can be done. Maybe you don't need 10 gaffers on your film, like like you gotta. And so when you're doing a budget as a producer, not to be a cheapskate, but you can kind of like, how to, you've had hands-on experience enough that you can kind of make a better educated guess on what things are going to cost and how much effort it's going to be without overworking people, because you never want to do that either. But having that hands-on experience gives you, it's better than just always being behind the computer, and typing, getting out there and getting it done and volunteering. I mean, there's a lot of people that need help on films, volunteer a couple days or whatever, like network, get out there. And I think hopefully that'll be helpful for people. I can go on and on and on.
Well, I love talking to a multi-hyphenate because they're able to look at and also bring up these kind of key takeaways from all these different aspects. And you touched on so many that I could talk about them all day. But one of the biggest things, like you mentioned about learning the different departments, is I felt really lucky to go to basically a 2-year tech school. So I have talked about this in various episodes, but to parallel, a friend of mine went to NYU, Tisch School of the Arts, for the 4-year film degree. And a lot of it was classroom work and dissecting movies and writing reports about them and reading books. And my film school was 2 years, 0 textbooks, no homework. Everything was, today we're doing 8 hours with sound. And
that's great.
Here's a mixer and here's how this, and then tomorrow we're going to spend all day on lenses. And the next day is we have 8 cameras set up and we're going to rotate, an hour on each one. So you learn them. And then the next day it's a continuity class and you're just doing production. And then you're all rotating through all the different departments. So you got to learn what it was like to do those roles. And you very quickly learned, the first year they kind of forced everyone to do everything. And then the second year, they're kind of like, you all figure out what you want to do. And the people who want to do sound, let them do it because they have a vested interest in doing the best sound they can. And the people who want to shoot, let them do it or whatever. And you got to even people out a little bit because some people don't want to do whatever. But it forced us to then go on sets and say, I know what these people need because I know at least enough about it that I can set them up for success, but I can also understand what they're saying when they talk to me and say, well, here's a problem because, or what have you. And it is so valuable. So whether you're doing that on your own, like learning about it, if you're volunteering on set, that's a great way to be like, they always need extra hands. Sometimes it's just holding a bounce board or, moving lights around or whatever, but you're going to get to know from those grips and those other people, like what's involved in those jobs. And it's just good education. So I can't stress that enough. The other point that you really mentioned, and I have a buddy who's a stunt coordinator over here, and he just did this big independent action film where they shot down in like on the Vegas Strip and everything. And he said, we get these people all the time and come in like they're an influencer or a content creator, and they're like, oh, they have 1 million followers. And he's like, okay, great, but can they act?
Yeah.
It's like, well, they're a dancer. He's like, okay, great, but do they know how to fight? Like, because I can't put someone in the stunt scene just because they know how to move well. Like, they're not going to look convincing or whatever. And he's like, this one, he goes, he did this one project. He said, it's great if we're like in the bar and there's a girl on the stage singing. Have that person be that person, because they can just look good and like lip sync or do whatever. He goes, but the people that get into the bar fight have to know how to do stunts. And in order to do stunts properly, they have to have some kind of fight background, because otherwise it's totally fake. You can't just go, well, they look good. Like you said, boy, they look really good with their clothes off. Well, you can't put that person in the fight scene unless they're the person who needs to be rescued. He goes, because it just doesn't work. He goes, so it's great when people come in and they have a huge audience. It's great when someone comes in and they look great. He's like, but if they can't do the job, you have to give them the job that they can do. And he goes, because partially that's going to set them up for success so they don't look silly. But it's also going to set your whatever you're making up for success too, because people are going to look at it and it'll be believable. And he goes, but that's the difference between people who like are in the film industry and people who are just like online. And I think that's one of those things that, quote, regular people, they are kind of having a disconnect now, because they're so quickly able to go from watching YouTube to watching Instagram reel to watching TikTok to watching a TV show to watching a movie, and they're just flipping apps on their phone. And it starts to all muddle together. It's just, I'm just watching stuff. But some people have spent 10, 20 years or more like learning how to act. And other people, to your point, are just like filming themselves doing stuff, And it's like, well, yes, you're watching both of them do things, but one of them is a master of the craft. The other is just food porn or whatever it is.
But those people are getting paid too. Those people that, and that's what's making it so hard for filmmakers to try to hire them, because they have an attitude. When I was trying to hire someone for a short film, one of the girls that I reached out to, her first question was, well, how much is it? How much would you pay me? I'm like, okay, well, we're talking about that right now. Like, you don't even want to talk about what I'm trying to do or whatever. And so I said, well, I would be paying SAG wages. Didn't hear back from her. Why? Because she's making more money doing her Instagram underwear thing, whatever the hell she's doing. And all right, I guess I'm some piece of shit, director, like whatever. Like, but they don't even care anymore, because they're being, paid to promote whatever corporate thing that they're trying to, but I think that that's going to change. I think there has to be a shift. There should be. And to your point, you're right. If someone is an actor, it's very different watching an actor who has experience than watching some influencer trying to be an actor. Like that's just because you have a screen and you're dancing in front of it's not the same thing. It just really isn't,
Well, I'm glad that you talked about those various things, because again, it's great it's one thing for me to say or agree with people, but one of the things I think is great, and this is another reason why I encourage people like watch the other shows, is there's through lines where I've had different people say versions of the same things. Learn how to do all the different departments, reach out, network, promote yourself, like learn how to produce your own films. And I did want to circle back to, so the narrative feature you're talking about is called Alluring. And I was just checking over on my other screen here. So it did win some awards. It did have a festival run, and then it got picked up for distribution. So talk to me a little bit about how all that happens, because as we've been talking about peripherally, it's one thing to learn how to make a feature film. It's another to actually make one. And it's an entirely other thing to like get it out onto streaming platforms so people can see it. So talk to me a little bit about how that all happens. You know, you mentioned earlier, like, oh, I had 4 months, we got it done, great. Okay, so then what happened after that?
Yeah. So I had no experience with distributors at the time when I made the film. And I told everyone that was involved, I said, that's my weak point. I that's what I don't know. And I was relying on someone to kind of take care of that. And because I was doing everything else, and they kind of didn't do that. They didn't go as deep as I would have done it. But I didn't have the time because I was so involved. And then in post-production, then we decided to hire someone to do the score. We have an original score. At that, before that, I was just thinking, oh, I'll just put on, from a library of music, I'll just put whatever. Thank God I didn't do that. But that was more money we had to raise. And now that choice gave us a little bit more options in terms of festivals, people being interested, and distributors, because when you have an original score, it's just one other thing that people are kind of like, oh, that's interesting, because there's a lot of films that don't have that. And so we hired a publicist slash producer rep, and they were the liaison between us and the festival. So they would, and I said to him, I said, hey, would it be okay if you BCC'd me on these emails, because I just wanted to learn the language, like, because again, this is my first time going through this experience, and you can really only learn it by going through it. And so he agreed. So he was writing to these festivals and just saying stuff like, keeping it casual, but like saying, hey, Tom, I'm representing these filmmakers. They've got this psychological thriller, The Luring. I think it'd be really great for your festival. Whatever. And what that taught me was, it's very different when you have someone else knocking on the door than me. Because and he told me, he said, I will at least get your film watched. So people will at least, they'll watch it at the festival. They may not accept it, but at least they'll watch it. And that's a much better step than, now if I had a name actor, that would even get me at a higher level. I mean, there's tiers to this. If you're a no-name person, you don't have anyone knocking on the door for you, you're at the bottom, unfortunately. And, you can hope that maybe you'll get, seen by one of their assistants that's watching the films, but, they're watching 20,000 films. I mean, realistically, a lot of them are not being watched. So at least, that was a big help. We made the mistake before we hired him. We had a premiere. We got accepted at some New Jersey film festival, which actually was amazing. We actually had a great time, but I didn't know at the time that your premiere status was, very important. I know that sounds stupid, but I just didn't occur to me. And I thought, well, it didn't really matter where our premiere was. It just matters where we're going to be showing. So if I get into a big festival, who cares if that's a premiere or not? And when we hired the producer rep, he said, okay, what I'm going to do is I have to do damage control. He says, that wasn't your premiere. That was a test screening. So now you still have your premiere. I'm like, okay, great. That was brilliant. And he says, your premiere is why you want to get pressed, for that premiere. He goes, but you want to be careful, because when you get pressed for your premiere, chances are they're not going to want to do press for you again when you actually are on a platform. So you have to kind of, you don't want to get too many stars in your eyes and think, okay, this is our moment and this is it, or, make it or break it. No, your premiere is great, and you want to get stuff too, butts in the seats and, some press, but you have to also think distribution. So that was interesting. And so he was then also the liaison between us and other distributors. We went through kind of like a situation, and thankfully we landed with indie rights. And indie rights I really like, because as you were saying, I don't know if this was on camera or not, before you started the podcast, but you were saying how indie rights has that support group, that Facebook support group, which I think is so valuable, because you're able to connect with other filmmakers, ask questions, because I'm a film nerd, and if I watch someone's film, like, I want to kind of know, like, well, how'd you make that film? And like, that's kind of cool. Like, I was watching one of your trailers with the girl and the guy, and she's asking him about his wife in that kind of like that closet. I forget the name of it. And I thought, wow, this is really cool. I wonder if the whole film was shot in that closet. And how smart would that be? Because that's only one location. So, as a filmmaker, your curiosity kind of arises. And so with this film group, you're able to ask questions where other distributors, they don't have that. They don't have that support group. They take your film, they can change your trailer, the title, the poster. If your film is a horror film, they can market it as a comedy or whatever genre that they want. If they think that more people are going to watch it, and they don't care about the reviews, they just want to get money. Indie rights, I think Linda, who owns Indie Rights, I think she really believes in art, and I think that she cares. And so far, I'm happy being with them, and I love the fact that I'm able to communicate with other filmmakers and make connections and network and just be a film geek and be like, hey, I saw your film, or I saw your trailer and I really liked it, or how, whatever, and you just share stories. And then if you find out that they live in your neighborhood, you maintain that kind of like that friendship, and hopefully if they need someone, you're a person that they might think about. So that is very valuable that other distributors just don't have. And so I think Indie Rights is their model, I think, is something that I think other distributors are probably going to be trying to replicate. But I think Indie Rights really has a good grip on it, because they have a wide library, but I think that their model on how they treat filmmakers and how they're transparent and how they give opportunities and how they give marketing tips and all this stuff. I mean, they really try to uplift the filmmaker. So you're a better filmmaker for being with Indie Rights than if you are with a distributor, because you may not have those opportunities with other distributors. So I think I'm very happy with where I'm at. So again, I don't know if I answered your question. I think I kind of trailed off. I couldn't do that, but you ask good questions, and it just gets me kind of thinking.
I love people that I don't have to prompt. Sometimes I've had some interviews that I have to really like encourage, like keep going. So, but it also leads me to places that I wouldn't have thought to go. So I really like when people go, A to Q to 13 to B or what have you. So, but I echo all that, and it ties back a little bit to what we were talking about earlier, which is like having this networking. And that was one of the things that was hard for me, is leaving almost 3 years in Australia and then landing in LA, and like all my connections are in a different country. Mm-hmm. And so in a way, being a part of like a distribution group, it's another way to network. Kind of like when you go to film school, you're like, oh, well, at least I know all the people in this school or this class, and we can rely on each other. Or, hey, I'm a local filmmaker. Who else is a local filmmaker? Like, let's all get to know each other, and we can help each other. So I think that regardless of where people are or what they're doing, is, like you mentioned, it's learning the art of networking and seeing how you can support each other, because you're all going to be able to do more together than you are on your own. To go into a slow close here, I wanted to ask, where can people not only see your film? We talked about the luring in particular, but maybe your other stuff. I know you have a lot of stuff on YouTube, but website, social, where can people connect with you, hire you, or see your work?
I guess maybe two places. My main places, I guess, my first main place is my YouTube channel, which is Christopher Wells Filmmaker. I have a lot of films that I am developing and that I'm in different stages, where I'll be posting it on my website, weirdshortfilms.com. And on my social, I guess my Instagram is Wells Christopher. I was trying to get Christopher Wells, but that was taken. So I got Wells Christopher. Those are like the three, I guess, main places. I try not, I don't do Twitter. I never really got involved with that. And the other socials, there's just be so many that I just sort of, kind of try to narrow it down, just to my Instagram. My YouTube channel is monetized, so that's a great place for people to reach out to me, because then at least if they watch something, I get paid like 0.02% of a penny. I'll take it, fuck it. But I mean, Instagram is a good way, or that, weirdshortfilms.com. I mean, that they can reach out to me that way, and that's going to be a fun website, because the films that are on there are weird and they're short, and they're not films because we didn't shoot it in film, but we call them films anyway.
Now, I do have your press kit for the luring, so I do want to have you just spotlight that too. So I know it's on a couple streaming platforms.
Oh
Where can
yeah.
people go see that?
So the Luring could be seen on Tubi. It could be seen on Google Play. It could be watched on Amazon, and Indie Rights is also showing it on YouTube. And a lot of people think like, oh, YouTube. Well, actually, YouTube is one of the higher platforms that pays. I think like the third highest. I think Tubi might be number one or two. I mean, obviously, those things, kind of switch and change. And I heard some things Tubi might be paying a little bit less now, which is disheartening. I hope that they reconsider. But YouTube is actually like a really good place for people to post their films. And so for me to have my film with Indie Rights on their YouTube channel, I'm very happy about that. I'm very proud to say that. Maybe 5 years ago, I would have been a little hesitant. That may not have been like, the top thing. I would have said, "Oh, my film's on Amazon," and maybe stop there. No, it's on YouTube, and it's great because they actually pay out a little bit better, So I'm very proud of that. Proud to be part of the Indie Rights family.
Those are great notes because some of this does change. Where like my first feature, it came out in 2019, and I remember which was shot in Australia a couple of years beforehand, and they got an agent, and they put it on. I mean, they have different streaming platforms in different parts of the world, and they're like, "We got on whatever." I'm like, "I've never even heard about that." Like, "We got on whatever." I'm like, "I never heard of that one either." Yeah. And they're like, "We're on Amazon Prime," and I was like, "Oh, I know that one," but it made me feel cool. So it wasn't until Indie Rights I'm like, "Oh yeah, like Google Play and YouTube and some of these other places, like, oh right, like just because it's the place that I like or don't doesn't matter. It's where are people going." And so
exactly
being on the top 3, the top 5, like you're just going to engage with more people and they're going to spread the word. So I really encourage people to share the links to watch the film. We, especially indie film, it's all likes and reviews and reshares and suggestions.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, the more, when you're doing a low budget film, you don't have a marketing budget that can compete with other bigger, films. And now Hollywood is, well, they've been doing this for years, since the 90s. They'd be like, "Oh, here's an independent film." Like, well, independent used to mean low budget. Now it can mean, 10 million, 20 million. It doesn't really mean anything. Now you have to put low budget. But, being a low budget filmmaker, it's every view counts. I mean, it really does. You have to fight for, it's like trying to, be a mayor. Like every vote counts. And to try to tell a different story. I mean, that's why I think low budget filmmaking is so interesting, because I don't mind a film a little rough around the edges. I kind of prefer that. I don't need everything to be so polished, or I want things that are going to be a little bit different. And I've watched so many amazing low budget films, and it's so much fun for me, because chances are I could probably reach out to the filmmaker, which is really cool. Like I'm a geek like that. But it's interesting to see what people can do with not a lot of money, and what, and then when you learn what hills they had to climb to get to that point is even more interesting. So I think the cool thing is for people who want to support low budget films, they can write a comment and actually get the filmmaker to have a dialogue with you, like ask a question, like, how cool is that? Like, that's, we're very reachable, other filmmakers, you don't have that ability to really kind of communicate with them. So I think this is a really good opportunity for people to learn more about films, or just be curious and just ask questions and, whatever.
Well, I can't echo that enough. So I'm so glad you brought that up, and I'm glad we got a chance to connect. Anything else you want to bring up before we start to wrap to a close?
Yeah. One thing that I think that people should do when they make a film, even if it's a short film, write a press release, put it on LinkedIn, put it on free. If you don't have a budget, I'm saying, if you have a budget, great, do more than that. Reach out to your local papers, get it out there, do marketing. Don't just do a short film and post it on your YouTube. Make a poster, create an IMDb. I just did a short film Saturday before Thanksgiving, and the actresses that I hired, they were all amazing. And I said, yeah, I'm going to make an IMDb. I'm going to do a poster. And they looked at me like, "Oh my God, that's so great. We just thought it was just going to be on your YouTube channel." And I knew I want to make an IMDb for it, but the reality is the actors want that as well, because it kind of puts them at a higher level. If they're just doing a video that's going to be in YouTube channel, okay, great, they might get recognized, but just, to be proud of your work, that's something. So I think low budget independent filmmakers that are making short films, don't just shoot it and post it. You should go through as much marketing, even if you have no budget for marketing whatsoever. Do something, have a press release, send it out, reach out to podcasts, reach out to, whatever, share your film, because it's important to kind of understand that, and that experience that will help you. Like I did a short film, Are You Happy with Pickles the Clown, which is like a satire and like kind of like a mock manifesto, and it has clips of Trump and clips of Biden, and news footage. And so I was trying to promote it through YouTube or whatever, and they told me that I wasn't able to promote it because it was during the election. And I wouldn't have known that if I didn't go through that process. So as a producer, that's something like, that's experience talking. Now I can I'm a little bit more savvy now with my marketing or whatever. And so, and how I got around that is like, you can now market let's say on Facebook, you put a poster and then you put the link in the comment section and you pin that. So there's workarounds. But my point being is that even for such a small little film like the one that I just mentioned, it's important that I went through that process of writing a press release, of doing all these like little things, because you learn so many things. You learn so much by doing. And then if I'm working on another film, a feature, I have that experience behind me, and just kind of, it's like a boxer. You don't just show up to the fight and fight. You got to practice. You got to practice the jab, the basics. You can't lose that. And so when you're doing your short films, you don't just make a film and that's it. You make a film and you go through the process of marketing and doing all this stuff. Even if you hire a publicist, they want you to have experience, because that's going to make their job a lot easier. So if you know how to write a press release, if you have realistic expectations, if you kind of know how to reach out to certain people, like that helps them. And it only helps you. So the more, I think it's important. I wanted to stress that, because I see a lot of filmmakers that, don't really put an emphasis on their marketing, and you don't need money all the time. You just get it out there. If people look for you and they see stuff, even if it's coming up from LinkedIn or whatever, free website, it doesn't matter. You're controlling the narrative. And I think that's important. And it's important to go through that process.
And again, to go back to the idea of like film notes, hence the name of the show, it's getting those type of notes like that, some people might go, oh yeah, that's a good confirmation of the thing that I do. So it becomes like a fact check. But then other people might go, oh, I never knew that. So it might be super valuable either way. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. And I'm glad we got a chance to connect today too, and talk a little bit about not only your background and what you're doing, but you already mentioned like all these other things that you're doing. So I'll have all those, we were talking about like the weird short films and all these things. The thing I like about having the YouTube show is people get to see this stuff.
Yeah.
It's great to listen to a podcast, but you get to see the link, you get to see the screenshot, you get to see the person. In that light, I did want to let people know this is a monthly show. So the first Monday of every month, I have a new episode come out with a new guest. But then mid-month, it does come out on all the podcast kind of streaming platforms. So if it is easier to just listen to conversations, great. But I always encourage people, go to the YouTube channel, like, share, and subscribe, all that kind of stuff. But you'll get to see the people instead of just hear their voice. And, as filmmakers, what do we want? We want people to watch our stuff. And partly that means watching us, but also seeing the posters and all the things. If you are listening to the audio only, please go check it out so you get to see who Christopher is and what he looks like and some of those things. But I just want to thank you again for being here. And for everyone who's listening, we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to support the show, please click on the link below. You can also contact me at my website if you have any questions about filmmaking or anything else. Off to the side, you'll see a couple of my books, Film Notes and the Film Notes Workbook. I encourage you to check those out if you'd like to learn more about filmmaking. See you in the next episode. Scene one, Apple, take one.